It was 5 hours when my secure line buzzed with an emergency from Singapore. Supply chain failure cascading through Southeast Asia. 3 manufacturing plants down, millions in losses piling up by the hour. I was already at my workbench, coffee cooling beside 3 monitors displaying real-time logistics data from 17 countries. "Phoenix to base," came Anderson's voice through the encrypted channel. "We've got a Category 5 supply disruption. Need immediate rerouting protocol." I pulled up the global map, red alerts blinking like Christmas lights gone wrong. Taiwan semiconductor delay triggered a domino effect nobody else could see coming. But I'd run logistics for Marine Expeditionary Forces in Kandahar. You learn to think 3 moves ahead when convoy routes mean the difference between life and death. Copy Phoenix. Initiating backup route Charlie through Thailand and Vietnam. Redirect Malaysia overflow to Indian Ocean shipping corridor. My fingers moved across the keyboard with military precision. 30 years of building redundancies into redundancies. While other companies had supply chains, I'd built what we called in the core a logistics web. Damage one strand, the others automatically compensate. Same principle that kept ammunition flowing to forward operating bases when the Taliban took out primary routes. Routes confirmed, base. You just saved us 48 hours and about 12 million in penalties. Just another Tuesday morning. By 0630, crisis averted, supply flowing again. I documented everything in my after-action report, same as I'd done for 3 decades. Proper planning prevents poor performance. Old Marine motto that never gets old. That's when my secure phone rang. Company business. 2 hours later, I was sitting in that boardroom at 0800 hours sharp, same as I had for the past 30 years, when Madison Cole looked me dead in the eye and said, "David, your time here is up." Just like that. No mention of the Singapore crisis I'd just resolved. No thank you for 3 decades of service. Her nephew Tyler was already wearing my access badge around his neck like some kind of trophy. Kid couldn't have been more than 26, fresh out of some Ivy League MBA program, smirking at me across that polished conference table. 30 years is a good run, Madison continued, sliding a folder toward me. Tyler will be taking over your responsibilities effective immediately. We need fresh perspectives, new approaches to modern logistics. I kept my face neutral. In the Marines, we learned early that showing emotion is showing weakness. But inside, I was running a tactical assessment. This wasn't just termination. This was a coordinated strike against experience itself. Around the table sat the board members, most of them 20 years younger than me. The old guard was gone, replaced one by one over the past few years with Madison's hand-picked modernization team. Corporate speak for pushing out anyone who remembered when handshake deals meant something. Madison had been under pressure from investors for months. The quarterly reports all showed the same demand. Reduce operational costs, streamline management, eliminate redundancies. In corporate terms, that translated to pushing out expensive senior staff and replacing them with cheaper alternatives. Experience had become a liability on the balance sheet. Tyler leaned back in his chair, already acting like he owned the place. "Don't worry, Mr. Strauss. I've been studying your systems through some consulting firms. AI-driven logistics, blockchain supply tracking, we're going to revolutionize everything. Studying my systems through consultants." This kid who probably thought logistics meant getting his DoorDash delivered on time was going to revolutionize 3 decades of military precision supply chain management with buzzwords and algorithms. I thought about my son Jake, junior year at Georgia Tech, studying industrial engineering because his old man had shown him what real systems architecture looked like. Last week, he'd called asking for advice about his senior project. "Dad, how do you build something that survives when everything goes wrong?" "Good question, son." Today, I was about to find out if I'd built mine strong enough. "The company needs to evolve," Madison was saying. "We can't be held back by outdated thinking." Outdated thinking. Like the outdated thinking that had kept us operational through the 2008 financial crisis, the 2011 tsunami, the 2020 pandemic, and about 50 other disasters these kids had read about in case studies but never actually managed. I thought about my Thursday morning call with the Brotherhood. That's what we called ourselves, the 17 international partners who actually kept this place running. All veterans, hand-picked over decades of shared missions and mutual respect. There was James Phoenix Anderson in Singapore, former Navy logistics officer who'd coordinated supply runs through the South China Sea during joint exercises. Rodriguez Hammer Santiago in Montreal, ex-Army quartermaster who'd kept 3 forward bases supplied during his tours in Iraq. Müller Rockschmidt in Germany, marine transport specialist who'd managed the Berlin airlift commemorative operations. 17 warriors across 4 continents who understood that some things matter more than quarterly earnings. Each one had earned their call sign through competence under pressure, not because some consulting firm thought it sounded cool. Every Thursday at 1400 hours, we had our secure conference call. Not just business updates, real talk about keeping global commerce flowing while corporate types played politics. These weren't just suppliers or partners. They were brothers who'd earned their place through service and sacrifice. Madison was still talking. "We'll need you to sign these separation papers now. Clean transition, you understand." I understood, all right. I understood that they thought they could just write off 30 years of expertise with a signature. They had no idea what they were really doing. See, back in 2009, after we nearly lost everything during that Taiwan semiconductor crisis, I'd insisted on adding some specific language to our international licensing agreements. Call it military paranoia, but when you've commanded logistics for 3 Marine divisions, you learn to plan for every contingency, including the possibility that corporate politics might try to remove you from your own operation. The clause was buried deep in the technical specifications section, written in language that would make a lawyer's eyes glaze over. If the original architect was removed without operational cause, all licensing rights reverted to me personally. The board had signed off on it without a second thought, desperate to lock in my loyalty after I'd saved their bacon. Military contingency planning, always have an exit strategy. I'd never thought I'd need it. Guess that's why they call it insurance. I picked up the pen and signed the papers. Madison looked satisfied, probably thinking she'd just pulled off some corporate coup. Tyler was already on his phone, probably updating his LinkedIn with his new title. Neither of them realized they'd just activated Protocol 7. Walking out of that building with my box of belongings, I passed through the engineering department where my guys were still at their desks. Tom Bradley, former Air Force systems analyst, gave me a subtle nod. Mike Johnson, ex-Navy communications, tapped 2 fingers to his temple, old military salute. These weren't just employees getting older in a youth-obsessed culture. They were competent professionals being systematically pushed aside for cheaper, more dynamic replacements. I wasn't the first to get the axe, just the most recent. Tom had been restructured 6 months ago, replaced by a recent graduate who knew Python but had never managed a system failure at 0300 hours. Mike was on the list for next quarter's optimization. 3 other senior engineers had already walked rather than wait for the inevitable. "Heard about the meeting," Tom said quietly as I passed his cubicle. "This place won't last 6 months without the institutional knowledge walking out that door." He was right. In the past 2 years, Madison had modernized away 40% of our senior staff. Guys with 20, 25 years of experience, replaced by recent graduates who knew every new software platform but had never actually managed a crisis when lives and millions of dollars hung in the balance. In my jacket pocket, my phone was already buzzing with messages from the Brotherhood. The first message was from Anderson in Singapore. Heard the news through back channels. "Orders?" Then Rodriguez in Montreal. "Standing by for instructions, Chief." Mueller from Germany, "What's the play, base?" One by one, they all checked in. 17 veterans across 4 continents, ready to move on my word. But I didn't give any orders. Not yet. I drove home to my workshop, the converted garage where I kept my real office. Not the corporate showpiece downtown, but the place where I actually got work done. 3 monitors, secure communications gear, detailed specs for every component in Veritech's global network, and my old Marine footlocker containing 30 years of crisis management protocols. Most people keep souvenirs from their military service. I kept operational procedures. That evening, Jake called from college. "Hey, Dad, heard you might have some time on your hands soon." Word travels fast. Tom Bradley's son is in my program. He told me what happened. "This is complete bullshit, Dad. You built that company's entire infrastructure." Language, Marine. "Sorry, but seriously, what are you going to do?" Good question. What does a career military logistics officer do when civilian leadership decides experience is a liability? "I'm going to teach them the difference between management and leadership," I said. "Sometimes the best lessons come from watching someone fail." That sounds ominous. "Just strategic patience, son. Your old man didn't serve 3 tours in logistics command without learning a thing or two about supply chain warfare. Week 1 was just the beginning." By 0600 the next morning, the first domino fell. My phone rang. Madison, her voice tight with what sounded like barely controlled panic. "David, we're having some issues with the Singapore facility. They're saying they need authorization from you specifically." "That's interesting," I said, pouring my morning coffee. "Tyler should be able to handle that, right? He's been studying my systems." They're refusing to process any shipments without your direct approval. Something about licensing protocols. I let the silence stretch for a few seconds. In the military, we called it psychological pressure. In civilian terms, it's just letting someone squirm. Sounds like a management issue, I finally said. I'm sure your nephew can figure it out. He's got all that modern training. She hung up without another word. By 1000 hours, Montreal had joined Singapore in freezing all operations. Then Germany, then Taiwan. One by one, every facility in our network went dark, displaying the same message. Original architect authorization required. The beauty of military planning. Redundant systems that fail safely when command structure is compromised. Tyler, apparently, had spent his first morning as my replacement trying to override the system manually. Kid had no idea that the security protocols I'd designed were based on military-inspired defensive planning. You don't just override 30 years of strategic preparation with an MBA and some consulting reports. But this was just the opening move. I knew it would take weeks, maybe months, to fully demonstrate the scope of the problem they'd created. The stock price started dropping that afternoon. First a little, then faster as word spread that Veritech's entire global supply chain had mysteriously stopped functioning. Social media picked it up by evening. #BringBackDavid started trending organically. Week 2 brought escalation. Tyler tried everything his consultants had taught him. He flew to Singapore personally, thinking face-to-face meetings would solve the problem. Anderson was polite but firm. "Nothing personal, mister. Cole, but I have standing orders from base. Until those orders change, this facility remains in standby mode. But I'm the new logistics director. I have authority here." Anderson's voice carried the kind of respectful steel that only comes from military service. "With respect, sir, authority is given. Trust is earned. And trust takes time." That Thursday, I held my first Brotherhood call since the termination. All 17 voices checking in with military precision. Phoenix report. Singapore operations suspended base. Local management getting nervous but holding the line. Hammer, what's your status? Montreal locked down tight. Canadian regulators asking questions but our paperwork's clean. Rock? Germany solid. EU compliance officers sniffing around but everything's by the book. One by one, they confirmed what I already knew. The network was holding, waiting for my word. 17 facilities, 17 countries, 17 veterans who understood that loyalty runs deeper than quarterly profits. Listen up, I said. This isn't about revenge. This is about demonstrating the value of experience and institutional knowledge. We maintain position until they learn the lesson. Stay professional, stay legal, but stay strong. Copy that, base. How long do we hold? As long as it takes. Week 3, the media circus began in earnest. Business reporters were calling for quotes, industry analysts trying to figure out what was happening. The story they settled on was perfect. Corporate greed backfires as veteran engineers' dismissal cripples global operations. LinkedIn exploded with posts from other experienced professionals sharing their own stories. Engineers, project managers, technical directors, all pushed aside for younger, cheaper alternatives, watching their former companies struggle without institutional knowledge. Tom Bradley wrote a particularly viral post. 30 years of crisis management experience walked out of Veritech yesterday. Today they can't handle a routine supply chain hiccup. This is what happens when you treat experience like overhead instead of the asset it is. Meanwhile, Tyler was learning the hard way that theory and practice are two different animals. He tried bringing in more consultants, experts who promised they could decode my systems and get operations running again. I got a call from Jim Collins, an old Marine buddy who worked security for one of our competitors. "Heard about your situation," he said. "Madison Cole's been making calls all day, trying to poach engineers from other firms. Apparently, she needs someone who understands your systems. Any takers?" A few junior guys are tempted by the money, but anyone with real experience knows better. Word's gotten around that she burned you after 30 years. Nobody wants to be next. The reputational damage was spreading beyond just operational problems. In the tight-knit world of senior engineering talent, Madison had marked herself as someone who couldn't be trusted. The best people started avoiding Veritech entirely. Week 4 brought the first board crisis. I didn't give any interviews about the situation, but I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Stock price down 20% and falling. Major clients threatening to find alternative suppliers. Investors demanding explanations that Madison couldn't provide. That's when Tyler showed up at my door for the first time. He stood on my front porch, looking like he hadn't slept in days. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been the beginning of humility. "Mr. Strauss, I think I might have made a mistake." "You think?" I invited him in, poured 2 cups of coffee, and sat him down at my kitchen table. For the next 2 hours, I gave him his first real lesson in logistics management. It's not just about the technical systems, I told him. It's about trust. Those 17 facilities don't just follow protocols, they follow people. People they respect. But how do you build that kind of loyalty? Same way you build anything that lasts. One interaction at a time. One crisis at a time. One promise kept at a time. Anderson in Singapore? I spent 2 weeks there in 2015 when his facility flooded, working 18-hour days to keep operations running. Rodriguez in Montreal? I flew up there every Christmas for 5 years running when his wife was fighting cancer, covered his shifts personally. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. The consultants told me that kind of thing was inefficient, that emotional relationships were bad for business decisions. Son, those consultants never had to manage a supply chain during a typhoon, or keep aircraft parts flowing to a combat zone, or build anything that had to work when failure meant people got hurt. Business isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's people trusting other people to do what they say they'll do. Is there any way, could you teach me? I mean, really teach me, not just hand over some manuals. That's when I knew the kid might actually be salvageable. But one conversation wasn't going to undo years of MBA programming. Teaching you would mean accepting that you've got a lot to unlearn first. All that theory about disruption and optimization, some of it's useful, but most of it misses the point. You ready for that? He nodded, but I could see he didn't really understand what he was agreeing to yet. Week 6 marked the turning point. Major clients started activating force majeure clauses, threatening to cancel contracts if shipments didn't resume soon. The board called an emergency meeting, and Madison's position suddenly looked a lot less secure. Tyler had been coming by my workshop twice a week for what he called mentoring sessions. I called them remedial education. The kid was smart enough, but he'd been taught to think about business like a video game where you could just reload if you made a mistake. Real systems don't have reset buttons, I explained during one session. When you're managing the flow of critical components to 17 countries, there's no undo command. That's why experience matters. We've seen what happens when things go wrong, and we've learned how to prevent it. I was teaching him to think in terms of redundancy and resilience instead of efficiency and optimization. Military concepts that civilian business schools don't cover because they're expensive and complicated. Why build 3 different routes when one works fine? He asked. Because when that one route fails at 3 a.m. on a Sunday, and you've got a manufacturing plant in Taiwan that will shut down if they don't get components by Monday morning, you need options. The military taught me that the cheapest solution is rarely the best solution when lives are on the line. Week 8 brought the board ultimatum. Madison was given a choice: fix the supply chain crisis or face a vote of no confidence. Investors were losing patience, and the company's reputation was taking damage that would take years to repair. That's when she called me directly. David, we need to talk. I figured we might. The board wants to discuss your return to the company. Discuss what exactly? There was a long pause. Your terms. Week 10. The resolution. The boardroom looked different this time. Madison sat at the head of the table, but she didn't own the room anymore. The confidence was gone, replaced by the kind of desperate calculation that comes when your back is against the wall. David, she began, her voice lacking its usual authority, we may have been hasty in our decision. May have been? We'd like to discuss your return to the company. I let them sweat for a moment, then laid out my terms. Not just reinstatement, elevation. Chief Systems Architect with Tyler as my apprentice. Full authority over all technical operations. And a guarantee that no decisions affecting core infrastructure would be made without consulting the people who actually built it. Furthermore, I continued, I'll be establishing a veteran hiring initiative. This company needs to remember that experience isn't just years on the clock. It's wisdom earned through service. We also want Tom Bradley and Mike Johnson back, I added, and the other senior engineers who left. Full reinstatement with apologies. They agreed to everything. They didn't have a choice. But I had one more condition. Tyler stays on as my apprentice. If he's serious about learning this business, I'll teach him. But he does it my way, at my pace. And he earns his position through competence, not connections. Tyler looked surprised but nodded. I'd like that, sir. As I walked back into that building, my access badge beeping green at the security gate, I thought about my son's question, how do you build something that lasts? The answer isn't just in the engineering, though that matters. It's in the relationships, the trust, the understanding that some things can't be replaced by newer models or cheaper alternatives. Tyler met me at the elevator, coffee in hand, ready to learn. Over the next 6 months, I'd teach him what they don't cover in MBA programs. How to earn respect instead of demanding it. How to build systems that survive because people want them to succeed, not because they have to. The Brotherhood was back online within hours of my return. 17 facilities humming with military precision, but more than that, with pride. Pride in being part of something larger than quarterly reports and corporate politics. "Welcome back, base," came Anderson's voice over the secure channel during our first Thursday call. "Good to have command structure restored." "Copy that, Phoenix." "How's morale across the network?" "Solid, Chief. Word spread fast that you handled the situation with class." Couple of other companies have been reaching out, wanting to know how to build the kind of loyalty you've got. "Tell them it's not for sale," I said, "but it can be earned." The real test came 3 months later when a massive earthquake hit Japan, disrupting supply lines across the Pacific. Tyler was in my office when the alerts started coming in. "Sir, we've got a Category 7 disruption. Multiple facilities affected, primary routes compromised." I watched him for a moment. "What's your assessment?" He pulled up the logistics map, scanning the data with eyes that had learned to see patterns instead of just numbers. "Primary routes through Tokyo are down, but we've got secondary channels through Osaka and tertiary backup through Seoul. If we activate the Indian Ocean shipping corridor and reroute manufacturing overflow to our Malaysian facilities, execute it." He coordinated the response with quiet confidence, no longer the arrogant kid who thought he could revolutionize everything overnight. When the crisis was over and supply was flowing again, he turned to me with something like pride in his eyes. 6 months ago, I would have panicked. 6 months ago, you didn't understand that panic is a luxury you can't afford when people are counting on you. Jake graduated summa cum laude that spring and took a position at my new consulting firm, Veteran Systems Solutions. Turns out there were a lot of companies that needed the kind of stability that only comes from experienced hands and hard-earned wisdom. "So what's the real lesson here, Dad?" Jake asked during one of our weekly father-son calls, now a tradition that matched the Brotherhood's Thursday conferences. "That building something that lasts isn't about the technology or the processes," I said. "It's about the people, the relationships, the understanding that trust is the only currency that really matters in the long run. And the military stuff, all the protocols and contingency planning, that's just good habit formation. But the real strength comes from knowing that the people around you will execute those protocols because they believe in the mission, not just because they're paid to." Madison lasted another 8 months before the board decided they needed new leadership. Apparently, corporate sharks have short shelf lives when the water gets rough, and her reputation for burning experienced talent made it impossible to attract the kind of people the company needed. Tom Bradley took over as CTO with Mike Johnson as his deputy. The old guard was back, but smarter now. We'd learned that you can't just rely on competence. You have to actively protect it against those who mistake disruption for progress. These days, I start my mornings in the workshop, reviewing global operations with the same precision I brought to military logistics 30 years ago. The difference is, now I'm building something that will outlast me, teaching the next generation not just the technical skills, but the values that make those skills matter. Jake stops by every Tuesday for our own father-son version of the Brotherhood calls. We talk about systems, sure, but also about legacy, about building things that endure not because they have to, but because they're worth preserving. "You know what I learned from watching you handle all this?" Jake said during one of our recent calls. "What's that?" "That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Just step back and let people see what happens when they remove the foundation." Tyler's working out well. Took him the better part of a year to unlearn the arrogance and start earning his place through competence instead of connections. Last month, he handled a major crisis in South America without calling me once, made his own decisions, executed flawlessly, and afterward called to debrief and see what he could have done better. That's when I knew the company was in good hands for the next generation. The Brotherhood still meets every Thursday at 1400 hours. These days, Tyler joins the calls, listening and learning from veterans who understand that some things can't be taught in classrooms. Anderson's been mentoring him on Pacific Rim operations. Rodriguez is teaching him about North American logistics. Muller's showing him how European regulations really work. He's earning their respect the same way I did. One crisis at a time, one promise kept at a time. That's how you build something that lasts. Not with contracts or clauses or corporate policies. With relationships. With respect. with the understanding that experience isn't just years on the clock. It's wisdom earned through service, sacrifice, and the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for. And sometimes, the best fight is the one where you don't have to throw a single punch. You just remove your support and watch gravity do the rest. The morning Madison fired me, she thought she was clearing out dead weight. What she actually did was remove the foundation. It took her 10 weeks to figure out the difference. Like I always told my Marines, proper planning prevents poor performance. 30 years of proper planning bought me the luxury of watching my replacements discover what happens when you mistake years for experience and position for authority. They learned, eventually. And that, as we used to say in the Corps, is how you achieve mission success. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't destroying your enemies, it's turning them into allies who understand why they were wrong in the first place. Mission accomplished.